First of all, we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm Karen Shoup. I'm a senior lecturer at Queen Mary, and I'm here in my role as part of the Institute of Coding, which is the Office for Student-funded initiative where universities and industry are getting together to support life learning to try and bridge the digital gap.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's James McLeod. I'm a software engineering lead at Lloyds Banking Group. We're an online digital bank, believe it or not. Many people would have known us from being in the high street, but we're actually really proud to be kind of like fully digital now. And we've got a hack team here at Athena, and so I'm really pleased to be here representing our team, and also, you know, talking about the next 30 years of the web.
So my name is Holly Armitage. I'm a strategist at BAE Systems and look after all of our data offerings. So I work with organisations of all shapes and sizes to help them make sense of the data revolution and help them navigate that world responsibly. And yeah, delighted to be here.
The microphone's working.
Is it? No?
Can people hear?
Can you hear me with the microphone? No? Okay, we'll use this then. Oh, I think that's working now. Is that right? Do you want to pass it back round? Yeah, I'm Dan Siemens. I'm head of digital product delivery at Domino's Pizza. And 20 years in technology in different sectors, including education, games development, and more recently retail. My functions include running the development of our e-commerce platforms in the UK and RO Island, as well as BI data warehousing functions as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Ellie Orich. I'm a talent program manager at Cisco. So my role involves sourcing and recruiting all of our early and career talent across our European and Asia regions, as well as looking at the professional development programs that we put our existing members of staff through to help grow their careers as well.
Oh, right, I hope the mic works. Okay, so we've got a range of questions that we're going to explore, and then later on we're going to take some questions from the audience who might have thought of a range of possibilities about what might happen with the web. So I'm going to start with the more positive one, which is the one thing that you'd like to see made possible in the next 30 years. So does anyone want to jump in with that?
Hi, yeah, okay, so I'll kick off. Okay, have I turned myself off? I think that you can hear me. Okay, so within the next 30 years within the web, it's very easy to kind of have a tech discussion about this, but I actually think it's more about what the relationship between technology and people is going to be like, and how you put people at the center of technology, rather than creating systems which are kind of like segregated for each other. And so I'm actually hoping that as the cloud evolves, and so we have Cisco and other people here providing cloud technology, and as we become kind of a lot more kind of in tune with technology as individuals, you know, coming through our academic, you know, backgrounds and into industry, I'm actually hoping that a lot of the various different distributed systems that we have and a lot of the services that are provided online actually come together and actually provide something which is a bit more guided for you and I. In such a way that actually things become a lot more intuitive, and the way that we play with technology is the same as how we actually converse with each other. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see something which is a little bit more human-centered, and that's something that actually brings people, wherever they may be, together.
So yeah, something I'm keen to see is more people online able to access. So I think I was kind of prepping for this session this morning, and they had 50% of the world's population are currently online, it's around 4 billion people. So what's exciting is more people being able to access information and insight. I think something that scares me in that space is how do we make sure that it's affordable and accessible. So even in the UK, you know, we've got varying levels of connectivity. So how do we make sure that over the next 30 years that everyone can access in an accessible and open way?
For me, I have maybe a love-hate relationship with the data side of things right now, and that's probably a topic we'll get onto. But actually, given that time span, thinking 30 years and thinking of how things might develop, it's the biotechnology field that I think is possibly most interesting. and how it could be supported by the backbone that's the computational raw data power as the internet develops. So the idea that more data could be mined real time about what we're doing as individuals, but in the most physical health sense, and literally telling us maybe to eat this, don't do that, etc. I think potentially that could be, the way that could turn around people's ability to live healthy lives and so on. Might be a bit pseudoscience-y right now, but I think it's something that there's markers in the sand right now that say more of that's possible. So yeah, kind of hooking me up to the internet and take my data about what I'm doing and tell me how I should be more healthy. I think that would be good.
I think for me, it's about what it unlocks for us as people. I think touching on all the points that you guys have made, what does the internet, what does technology enable us to do that we can't do right now, and whether that's working in a smarter way, working more productively, or being able to harness that data and use that to tell stories and give meaning to things that we don't yet understand. The way that tech is moving and the pace that it changes, there's an endless amount of possibilities of things that can be achieved over the next 30 years. And I think putting people at the centre of that and really using the pace of change as a catalyst to enable people to do more or be able to build connections, that's, I think, what I'm excited about.
Great. So I think one of the questions which comes almost immediately from that, and also partly, I suppose, in response to Dan, about I want to plug myself and my data into technology, is are we going to keep using the web? Are we going to shift more to providing and interacting through apps, or possibly through the Internet of Things, where we're actually bypassing the web, the HTTP or HTTPS, that we're actually going to use a different application? Or will the web be something which runs alongside this? So when we're going 30 years, is it, do we look backwards and say 30 years of the web and then another 30 years? Or it's one of the many competing approaches? Who wants to go? Dan, do you want to plug, given that you're going to be giving your data?
Yeah, maybe I've not given a fair approximation of what I actually want to do. I don't want to quite be plugged in. But no, I don't think it's going to exist. I think it's accelerated so quickly over a relatively short space of time. And we're already seeing with the increase, there's a few things. Increase of things like voice, which, depending on where you're using it and how you're using it, is increasing a lot or isn't. There's a lot of hype still. But certainly, if you look at the way perhaps mobile phones have taken off in the last 10 years versus a desktop and a seated environment, and certainly with the data I see through, in particular, both games and then retail experience, it's changed how you connect to people just hugely and in a very short space of time. I have to say it because I've often said it round offices over the years, but I think most of the interfaces we have are terrible. Anyone, and hey, hands up, I don't know what's studied right now, but I certainly did human computer interface design at university, and counting the number of times one might move the hand between a mouse and a keyboard, etc., in order to navigate an interface. And that was humans being taught to use a very artificial sort of medium, really, to access what was behind it. So what's behind it is actually great. I think that is the network that's joining up our future world. But without trying to second guess what will exist exactly, I see the ways we interact, the way we consume data, the way we receive data or give it, etc. I just think it has to change just hugely, subject to the usual laws, costs, politics, etc.
I think for me, the World Wide Web is where everything really started from, and that's where applications have been able to take their section of the World Wide Web and create that in a centralized space that enables a Dominos or a company or a bank or whatever it may be to control the space in which their customers are operating, rather than potentially losing them outside of that. So I think the web will exist as the backbone in the background, but I do see people more and more focusing on the applications or the particular systems and tools that they use in their space. rather than kind of logging on to the World Wide Web in years to come.
Right, so I'm in agreement with everybody here because people do have different perspectives on things, but I think that what we need to be careful about is actually carrying on labels, from the previous 30 years into the next 30 years. And when you actually think about it, the World Wide Web is actually just a layer that actually sits upon HTTPS, which is just a protocol that sits upon IP, which is basically getting down into your IP addresses and passing data around. So if we kind of project that forward and think about how we actually engage with the technology, how we actually plug each other in, so whether it's through a Fitbit, which I'm wearing, or, various different Apple devices, or maybe even, I don't talk about this too openly in front of people who I don't know. I have diabetes, and now you can kind of get patches that you wear on your arm that measure your blood sugars and kind of just broadcast it directly to your mobile. And then your mobile will aggregate that data, it will put it into the cloud. I can have a look at all of my blood sugar averages, I can see whether I'm being good or bad. That can then kind of go to an insulin pump if I was to wear one, or I can actually use it to change the control of my insulin. And so all of these things are actually stemming from just raw binary, the ability to pass data around. So, DNA in the future will probably be something that will be integral to keeping everybody in touch with the data that they have in the cloud, But I think as we kind of project ourselves forward, and it's a bit like watching Star Trek, I suppose, we need to make sure that we don't kind of hem ourselves to the past by using labels that don't necessarily apply to the future. And, we keep that kind of creativity around us about, the art of the possible. And just think about, how can all of these various different touch points in technology be applied to the individual for solving, kind of big problems. And for me, rather than talking about, will the World Wide Web exist in 30 years? It's like, well, how do we actually get people who are coming into technology engaging with it in a way that allows the individual to be creative with the way that it evolves? And so rather than giving it a label, it's about evolution. And that might be taking it right back to the very start, machine, language, IP, just raw data. So that's what I think anyway. So it's about the evolution of the past into the future by removing the labels of the past, if that makes sense.
I think you're saying is really interesting because actually, slightly off topic, what we were talking about outside was the role of STEM professions with creativity and around your point around having users at the centre and about being able to plug yourself into getting value out of your own data. So I think kind of the Internet of Things for me is something I can't even begin to comprehend what's going to happen in the next 5 years, let alone 30. That ability from our world just being, I've heard of it like an inert world, one that's pulsing with data coming in and out of various systems. I think that's really exciting, but also quite petrifying at the same time. And for me, it's about the role of data literacy and technology literacy. How much do you understand about how your data is being used, the experience you want, what the possibility could be, so you're making informed conversations and decisions about how your data is used, and do you want personal medical information being out there? So yeah, for me, Internet of Things is something I'm really excited about, but at the same time, absolutely petrified, because I can't begin to imagine what the world could look like in 30 years' time, with that same caveat that predictions aren't always the strongest thing. I think we said we'd solve diabetes by 2020, and I'm not sure how that's looking, but yeah, the next 30 years are scary but exciting for me.
So I suppose in some ways, if we don't just talk about the web, if we just say the internet in general, I guess one tricky thing comes with it is how does industry position itself? And so which industries do we think are going to benefit? And then the tricky thing, say as an educator, is what am I educating what world am I educating my students towards? What can they inform? And government's got to think about this as well, because it's potentially, one question would be, well, what industries do you think are benefit? And the other is, what could be the next industries in the way that gaming is now so large? I mean, it's larger than music and film combined, but 30 years ago, it probably was for still get off that computer game and actually go and do some proper work. So again, I suppose, Dan, well, in fact, both Dan and James have mentioned health. What other fields do you think are sort of emerging as a result of activities at the moment which you think might be kind of bubbling under?
Okay, so believe it or not, financial services to me reminds me of when I joined the industry back in 1999, and Cisco and Microsoft were kind of like the big dominant forces. They were actually providing a lot of money to lots of little startups who were there to disrupt the internet at that point. So I remember around 2000, within the UK, maybe not, everywhere in the world, we were migrating away from having telephone modems in order to, dial into your ISP, check your emails, then go onto Alta Vista and maybe go onto Yahoo in order to check, the weather. And then all of a sudden we had like the ADSL broadband revolution, which, Cisco was like a major player in that. And all of a sudden we had startups kind of like coming into the market around Thames Valley. So in Reading, where, I was at that time, we had startups literally popping up next to Cisco and Oracle, and also next to Microsoft, who were no more larger than the people around these tables, come up with some great ideas and literally kind of like saying, we can get voice over IP, we can start streaming kind of like real-time video to each other, and together as software engineers, we're actually solving these problems. Now, within financial services, obviously there's been a great history, in recent years about, what's happened, around 2008, which has actually, created quite a regulated industry. And around about now, we're actually, we're getting our confidence back, to such an extent that we're seeing challenger banks hitting the market, which are like the startups of, the early 2000s. We've got fintech financial services players coming into the market, which is solving individual problems. And so, for me, being in financial services right now, it kind of reminds me of when I was a graduate recently, hitting the market, being able to play with technology, because the whole industry is realizing that software and engineering and allowing people to be, kind of playful with technology is actually changing the way that we actually engage with finance, both in terms of money, money in the bank, how do you make transactions, but also in the way that we can actually help people with money as well. And that's where the human-centeredness comes in. And so banks are actually being a lot more aware, because challenger banks are actually really aware about this, about how you and I engage with our financial transactions. And so being a software engineer within financial services is really great, because we're playing with new things, we're learning new methods, we're realizing that we're smart, and we also have a voice as well. And so for me, financial services is actually a really interesting place to be.
I think for any company and any industry to survive in the future, they're going to need to be a technical company at the heart of it. If you look at recent organisations that are really disrupting the way that we operate, Uber don't own any cars. It's a technical platform at the centre, and it connects people to vehicles. Airbnb don't own any properties. They connect space to people that want to experience new locations. So for any organisation, for any industry to survive into the future, it's about what are the technical platforms that are enabling their business, but also what's enabling that customer experience alongside it. And I think that's what's really exciting for all industries, as they kind of start to make this shift into more technical spaces whilst delivering the core of their industry at the heart of it.
I think for me as well, it's something about those that get data and technology opportunities and those that don't. So we think about over the last 5-10 years, the progression in it, that primary school teaching coding. We're going to have two groups of people in society: those that have grown up with technology, and perhaps being about my parents here, but perhaps like my parents who aren't the most technology literate they're not native in it. So I think for industry, how they make sure that they are serving both parts of the market. You know, it's great having amazing digital platforms, but if, you know, there's certain demographics or age groups or profiles who don't get how to use it, you're almost isolating parts of a market. So I think it's back to more about user centres and how people interact with it. How do you help people get it? You know, online banking is great, but if it means that you're closing down banks and branches that people can't access, you know, what does that mean for people? How do they access those services? So I think for industries that can work out how they're going to target and serve different parts of the market whilst hopefully upskilling and supporting them on that transition, I think they're the ones that are going to be most promising and exciting to watch.
This is, I mean, subject to what comes next, this is a horrendously difficult question to answer, I think. I mean, if you stand back and look at a lot of the examples given, we've seen a lot of great references, particularly in the last 20 years, of companies that have seen ways to get in existing sectors and existing industries, but find different ways to come into them. So we haven't seen necessarily, in my view, a lot of new sectors emerging, but amazingly good challenges on how to do that. Banking's a great one, gaming and social gaming, etc. And I think it's that affordance of technology that's really allowed that to shift. The speed at which companies can emerge and conquer is given, and indeed globalize, has been given a more open playing field because of technology. And I think some of the things that are really kind of influencing what does and doesn't work are still the most human of factors. You know, we see a huge drive based on convenience today. You know, convenience is everything to people. Cost hasn't gone away. You know, if you can offer a service cheap, it gives you an advantage in the market. But I think, whilst I don't think I can come up with some new sector that I can't imagine, it's not about to happen. But I do think the importance of brand and trust are going to be key in this age. The brand and trust will help you ride most of those challenges. People will still, I mean, even with the Challenger bikes, which is a great example, and I am one who uses them happily. But there's that huge inertia with the majority of people who don't get it yet, don't understand it, or won't trust it, because they don't really get the model yet. So it's still early for those people. But I think where you've got a trust relationship with your customer and your brand is really strong, that's going to see you through, whether it's scandal, challenge, or the emergence of other challenges for a long time, I think.
So do you think it's more, in your opinion, how old school organisations work with kind of new organisations? If you're a new emerging tech company, perhaps you haven't got the brand that others have. So is it you think about how some of the old school industries perhaps look to work with fintechs or emerging technology firms to kind of bring their skills in? Is that kind of...
I think the largest organisations, you know, size does allow some advantage once you get into looking at corporations and how they work. There are those that take a long time to change. Maybe Debenhams would potentially be an example here. I didn't want to go down this route, but you know, you can see organisations that have been around a long time and they just don't get what change should look like or could look like. Similarly, there are people who've opened their doors in the last 20 years on the back of the internet, and just because you're a technology company or an internet era, Web 2.0, a .com type era company, does not mean you're safe yourself. You know, others that have gone down within that sort of 20 to 30 year frame. Speed of change is still critical to businesses. It's a famous phrase, so apologies, I can't remember who said it, but if the speed of change out there outpaces the speed of change in here, the end is in sight, and that's true now as any time. Apart from the speed of change seems to have got a lot quicker. So I think if you're a large organisation and then not a technical organisation now, that does not mean you are done. But whatever approach you want to take, whether that's through acquisition, popular, or working with disruptive startups, or just bringing in good people, which is very common. You know, we don't really live in, or society has changed in that baby boomer era of a period of your life learning, a period working, a period retiring, is not what most of us are experiencing today. So moving around companies and companies bringing talent in that can help accelerate and move your industry forward, I think is another route for survival.
I think that's also a massive threat to organisations is that volume of talent, and I think that's why events like this are so incredibly important in making sure that we're profiling the types of opportunities in the career, the amazing careers that can be had in tech, particularly for women, given that there's a massive underrepresentation, is really important, because if organisations do not have that talent that can continue to drive and innovate and push their organisations forward, then they're kind of stifled, and that whole process starts to crumble down. So talent is absolutely key in enabling that, I think.
So coming back onto your point about what will make a large enterprise successful in the future, versus a more lean startup or a fintech organisation. I actually think that the future of any enterprise or any kind of like small company that scales fast, like a lot of the challenger banks that we're seeing now, have started small, but they're actually growing really rapidly. Maybe not into the numbers as Lloyds or any other retail bank has right now, but at some point they're going to hit kind of like almost like a momentum where they may slow down, or they may start to aggregate what we call kind of technical debt, where you kind of deliver a feature, and you don't do it fully, and you think as a team, okay, the delivery of the feature is actually more important than actually doing it correctly. And so this is where we need to educate the mindset of the people who are actually running these organisations, to make sure that engineering teams actually have a voice in the right way of doing things, and that quality, as well as the customer, is always at the centre of engineering. And not only that, but we're actually automating as much as we can in order to make sure that quality is always moving forward, through unit testing, through BDD, and various other, kind of automated processes that we can use. Plus also leveraging the cloud, so we don't have to think too much about what services that we're actually consuming, but we've got big kind of like cloud players providing those for us. But ultimately, when you actually come down to kind of like the smaller unit of decision, and that's where it falls onto people like me and people who are actually coming through universities, it's actually how we make our systems kind of pliable, and the ability to exchange, bits and pieces, using microservices, APIs, and how you can actually exchange data around, which will make sure that all of the enterprises of tomorrow don't actually fall into the same trap as the enterprises of yesterday. And this is something that we're actually trying to turn around within Lloyds Banking Group, because the thoughts of legacy banking, as you would know it, is we're holding the cash, we're absolutely fine, we'll look after our own systems, and people will come to us because they need a bank account. But actually, giving people choice, within the marketplace, so, if you were to come to Lloyds, but actually there was a loan somewhere else within financial services, which is most appropriate, giving a customer of Lloyds the opportunity to look at a loan which is being provided elsewhere. And this is where kind of like open banking and a lot of the APIs that are actually being either developed or could potentially be developed for the future make sure that the entire industry is a lot more connected. So within Lloyds Banking Group's kind of like mobile app now, you can actually use open banking to look at all of your bank accounts from lots of different service provider of finance. And that's also something that a lot of the challenger banks are doing. And so it kind of creates this flow around the industry rather than locking in people.
And I know it's not my role as a moderator to add, but given that I'm an educator, and it kind of relates to various things you've been seeing, but part of it is the storytelling of companies. So if I get the computer science students and I say IBM, they fall into one of two camps. It's either big grey computers, which is the old story, or it's AI because of Watson. But then if I get my design, innovation, creative engineering students or my creative computing students, they consider that IBM is a design company, a design tech company. So there is this world of design tech coming through, and you wouldn't have necessarily thought it of IBM, but for them, at as one of the kind of the big name companies, again through reputation of the the established company, that's for Holy Grail to work. They'll take pay cuts to work for IBM. So it's a strange way that industries are coming through unexpected industries, which is really exciting. But the storytelling needs to come down to the students and then actually to the school students so they make the right decisions.
I think as well, I think something we need to make sure we're doing in technology organisations is the job titles we have. Some of the ways we describe our jobs, I mean, Scrum Masters, even like, some of the words we use just don't make sense. I sometimes wonder what 4-year-old says, when I'm older I want to be a, infrastructure architect, because sometimes those words don't mean something. So I think it's something about those working in industry. How do we make sure that the jobs we do and actually what we do, they make sense in a meaningful way? I sometimes think we we're our own prison guards in this space, that we use these terms which don't mean things to people out in the real world. And in order to make sure we're getting the best talent in, we're solving the right problems for people using technology, and we're really using people's data in a right way, we kind of leverage everyone's skill set. It's not now enough to have an advanced degree in mathematics, it's how you think about that from a human perspective. So I think there's a responsibility for us in the industry about how are we communicating the opportunities that are there and the complete variety of skills. It's not just about STEM now, I've heard it, I think it's a STEAM or a STEAM as well, about the arts in there as well. And I think often we box students into, you're a maths person, you're a words person. And we forget that actually, for me, the magic comes when you blend those two together. How do you get people that think in the most creative, artistic way, coming with those that are kind of into that logic way of thinking?
And I think actually, in the future, it's that creativity, it's that storytelling, it's that artistic approach, really, that machines aren't going to be able to do. And that's where, as humans, we can really bring things to the next level by bringing that creativity and actually looking at those new ways that we can utilise that technology to do whatever it is that we're looking to achieve.
I think if we don't do that, we're going to end up in a situation, my mic's working or not, sorry, we're going to end up in a situation where the web will just become just a bunch of numbers and things, whereas it could become an opportunity. I don't think if we blended, to your point, creativity and opportunity with the technical know-how, I think that's where the next 30 years will be really exciting, the kind of the utopia as opposed to the petrifying dystopia.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I really think the flexibility of skill set that comes out of either the courses in this day and age or the placements and companies people work at is absolutely key. Another facet of technology shift over this 20, 30 years of the web is jobs have been reinvented several times over, even in that time frame. There are roles that would have existed that don't exist anymore. And not just as simple as picking a programming language that it just isn't commonplace, although it's still as true today as it has been 10 years ago, 20 years ago, etc., that certain ones fall out of favour or other ones become more popular. So most people who code are not necessarily coding the same thing 10 years after they start anyway. But then when you emerge other fields that are, let's say, very data intensive or go into ML, etc., I think the highest quality organisations allow people to flow between those things, particularly once you've got some sort of domain knowledge in your actual field or your company. So it's possibly going out on a limb, but possibly more so and in the future than ever, being able to think broadly and being able to move between skill sets over years is possibly going to be even more valuable than at any time before, rather than I do X, I'm an architect, I will now be an architect for 40 years. I don't think that's going to be the future at all.
Continuous learning is only going to get more and more necessary for everyone in every career, particularly in tech.
Now, I've got more questions here, which we can, and then they go into the negative, because we've actually been rather positive. But I think before we do that, are there any burning questions in the audience? Oh, Jane over there.
Oh, come on. What's the question?
I just wanted to hit more about the dystopian future that we might be experiencing.
Full of
I started off my email about possible questions based around reading Surveillance Capitalism, which has had quite a lot of press at the moment. And a group of us, I've got law professors, cognitive science professors at Queen Mary, we're reading it and practically weeping. So I then had kind of the negative point, and I suppose the kind of obvious one at the moment, kind of where we are politically, is how do we stop bad actors? So, you know, extremists of, you know, if it's political thought, religious thought, or various cultural thought, how do we stop them drowning out thought and voices? If we go back to the web, or, you know, through search, or even, I suppose, the apps with the social media apps, help, I suppose. And you're going to solve it.
I guess from a Cisco perspective, our technology is about securing the internet and the applications and the systems and tools that all connect to the internet, and making sure that whatever data is running through that is not corrupt and is not being watched or is not being used for illicit purposes. And I think looking forward, the way that we can continue to make the internet a safe space and make sure that the information there is correct and sourced and factual and not being taken over by those bad actors is really about the way that we collaborate with industry and governments and education and making people aware about how they're interacting with information online and where that information has come from and what the source of that Twitter post is and all of those things. So it's that collaboration, it's working together, building that awareness, and really just taking that moment to sense check, where did I find this out, where has this information come to me from, and then starting to build the picture from there.
I mean, since I've slipped in one quote, I'll try another, which again won't be accurate, but we'll go for the gist of it. Jurassic Park this time. There's certainly something in there that's around, you know, your scientists are busy thinking how we do something, not whether we should. And the internet does feel a little bit like that to me at times. Having been involved in, as I say, various different sectors and therefore been in touch with different communities and audiences in different ways. And through to even big retail where, whether it's broadly known or not, I think it probably is if you say it, but people don't actually say it. Pretty much any organisation that has some connectivity to the web is being attacked constantly. That's the reality. So for anyone who's not worked and not been close to positions that might get that, that is the fact of today, whether it's what might be labelled script kiddies, whether it's bots, or whether it's some genuinely serious attempts. There's that level of the world we live in, not just the extremist level of what might be posted, populated, shared, or even tried to be manipulated. So I think underlying this is technology may have accelerated or created new opportunities, but it's a human problem more than a technology problem, I think. And I don't know if it's very dystopian even just to try and ignore it, because I certainly don't think it should be ignored, but it comes back to potentially the question of who controls what should be said, if that's where we're going. And that's a far above my pay grade kind of topic to get into, but I think controlling it is very, very challenging. Who does that and how? I don't know.
But somehow on a local level is like human, well, us and is that kind of our responsibility. So at BAE, my two research subjects are ethics and literacy. And on April Fool's Day, my husband sent me a great post, which was, on April Fool's Day, it's the only day people critically evaluate what they find on the internet before accepting it. And it really made me laugh, because it's on April Fool's Day, you see everyone kind of looking through the papers thinking, oh, that's definitely the April Fool's joke. And we just accept everything we see on the internet. We don't always, but we often just accept it at face value. And we can talk a lot about whose role is it in society to moderate, should the internet be moderated. I think, how do we kind of bring back human beings and ask them to kind of critically think about what they're seeing before accepting it? It's almost like people just accept everything they see, and we are forgetting that critical thinking aspect of the human brain and kind of trying to apply that. I think that's really what worries me about bad actors. So from being from BAE, I could talk a lot about cybercrime, but there's also people that are just having some fun. I'm going to put a bit of kind of gossip, a bit of rumours, a bit of conspiracy theorists out there. Conspiracy theorists have been around long before the internet, and they're just using that as a platform to talk about it. And the same way that you perhaps down the pub, have a conversation about it, and you would critically evaluate it. Do we apply that same thinking when it's online? And I sometimes do wonder about how we switch our mentality between offline and online. And then are we training, are we upskilling people of all ages, of all skills, again, back to digital literacy, about how am I going to think online? Am I going to think differently? Should I think differently?
Okay. So you've actually asked a question which, for me, can kind of like take me down kind of like a real society view. And this is actually a really interesting thing, right? Because within technology, you know, we could be the gatekeepers to a lot of things. You know, so we work, you know, within the networks, and we can filter things out. You know, we can look for certain things using AI, which they're teaching in one of the lecture theatres over here. You know, we can physically, you know, kind of like cut off the traffic of opinion of people, you know, so other people don't hear it. But for me, I've got to ask the question, you know, is that actually the right thing to do? Is that actually kind of just closing off a particular kind of like river of opinion, only for it to be diverted somewhere where you don't have visibility of it? You know, and we've all heard of the web, and you know, you may have heard of the dark web as well. You know, the area of the internet where servers do exist, you know, but they're just not indexed, and that's what the dark web is. And so, what I actually think it actually comes down to is, it's about how you actually engage with people again. You know, so whether it's kids in the classroom, or whether it's your neighbours in different countries, or an understanding of a group of people who, you know, to them they're doing the right thing, but in the view of other people, they're doing, you know, really bad things, and they shouldn't be doing that. And so what would be really quite interesting is we do need, you know, firewalls, we do need, you know, to stop people gaining access to people's personal data, you know, and we do need, you know, the police to be able to follow up on criminal activities that puts people at a disadvantage. But I'd really like to see AI being used in a way where you can kind of say, you know, this area of society over here obviously has a view of how things are happening somewhere that is actually starting to radicalize people. It's starting to actually gain, you know, momentum in a way that is actually disrupting society, you know, and ask the question, you know, what can we do as kind of like a global community in order to kind of calm that down? You know, and for all of the barriers that you can put up to stop that, technology is actually applied better when it actually removes things. And within politics at the moment, we're seeing a lot of barriers being put up right around the wall. I don't want to get into that. That was kind of like, you know, but there are virtual walls, you know, there are physical walls, but actually technology is actually breaking those down. But for whatever, you know, technology wall we actually remove, there's a physical wall going up, you know, and so why don't we just, you know, start looking at how we actually flip that around, and so stop blocking kind of like the flow of data and start understanding where it's actually coming from and the reasons why, you know, and I do understand that there's also, you know, people manipulating kind of like for their own personal gain as well, and I'm not entirely sure how we kind of like solve that. It might be, you know, more of the same. But for me, it's kind of like society, politics, technology, and how we actually get that common view of, you know, how you actually educate people at source.
I think the challenge is still that technology is just changing society or enforcing society to change, some in whichever direction things are happening, but at a pace that we're just not experienced in the past. And it's really hard to keep up and figure that out. Myself and my CISO at work were having a chat the other day about whether we thought the generation behind us would look at us and blame us for the internet. So this was very much the dystopian part, not the happy part, of which the internet and technology has done a lot for us, but very much the dystopian part, the cyberbullying, the people going offline, the flame wars that might start on Facebook, which I don't think is a good medium for a conversation, and I exited Facebook some time ago. And even I, as a sort of technologist, a lifelong technologist, I started coding on a Spectrum when I was 7. If you can work out a Spectrum in 7, you can probably age me by that. But it is a lifelong interest in technology. But these sides are horrendous in what they've done. And I'm not saying those facets of humanity and society didn't exist, But I do think the internet and some of those nice large systems that we all like to use at times have helped provide a medium by which there's very little comeback. It's very depersonalized and even dehumanized. And we've kind of all signed up and allowed that just to wreak havoc to some degree. I don't think they're all going to disappear, but I do see some sort of balancing having to happen to try and, if not control and create a single voice of the truth, but something that allows a happier kind of medium to emerge out of maybe this first experiment or first few rounds of experiments. Because the connectivity that it does provide, there's a lot of positives there as well.
And I think it's those connections that you really have to harness and being able to collaborate in those spaces and take that understanding of where information is coming from and use that to educate people and bring voices to the table that wouldn't necessarily have always come there without this is really how we enable that positive change and that positive outlook in the future, because it is those barriers that kind of batten down the hatches and say, no, we're going to control this information, that then creates those kind of dark spaces where other information that people want to seek. We're evolving in a world where information is accessible in seconds, in milliseconds. And so if you can't find the answer that you want or the answer that you believe to be true, then you will seek that from somewhere else. And there is no way of stopping that.
Do you think part of it is that the advancements in, so obviously we've had so much opportunity in technology, but they're also presenting kind of complex legal, social, ethical issues. It's almost like they don't get considered. When you think how long it takes legislation to go through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, was that like up to like 18 months, 2 years sometimes? You know, technology moves at such a pace. I wonder sometimes that we are inhibiting our own opportunities in society because I don't know what the word is, but the enablers around them maybe, like the legal frameworks, the rules, the regulations are not in place. I don't know, but when you kind of explore that.
Okay, so I think that we need to be careful about putting too much law and regulation around advancements in technology. And if you kind of like take this back to, you know, the days of the horse and cart, or the days before, you know, the Romans actually crossed across Europe, would we be having this same debate about the Romans joining up towns using roads, you know, and connecting societies together that, you know, enable people to cross boundaries in villages? You know, I think that we would actually laugh at that right now, you know, but actually that was, you know, that actually existed, you know. People, you know, being able to travel, being able to use modes of transport, the Industrial Revolution, you know, kind of allowing things to be produced in a more cost-efficient and effective way. Would we have gone back and said, regulate, you know, the creation of roads, the creation of cars, you know, the creation of aviation? I don't think that you can. I think that what you need to be able to do is learn how to evolve at the pace of change, or actually enable the people who are the people who are making the change in order to put, you know, all of the safeguards and the ability to keep up with it. And so regulation could be actually the thing that's slowing us down from being able to keep up with technology.
Or enabling organisations to get into it. So if you didn't have the likes of GDPR, would my data be safe? I'm a data strategist. I like to think I'm relatively informed about data. I can't read legislation properly because the words are really complicated sometimes. But actually, is it meaning there's more opportunities for other firms to innovate? I don't know. But it's interesting to find about kind of the rules of online and offline, and actually when do they become blurred, and people that don't understand how data's being used. You know, when you look at Facebook, you see how people give away their personal data to play Candy Crush, or, you know, through a farm of an animal at somebody. You know, it's like sometimes I look at what my mum does, I'm like, Mum, don't share that data. It's how it's being used. But whose role is that to make sure, to help people understand or make a choice, and about how companies exploit people's information which they access? I'm not sure there's a right answer, probably a long session on trying to work it out, but it's such an interesting one about the role, I think, of government, society, individuals, organisations, corporations. It's, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is, or kind of where the parameters should be.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to working together, and that there is no one solution. It takes all of us to come together, industry, governments, education, society in general, in order to understand what we want to be the right thing and the good opportunity that tech and the internet enables for the future.
Right, this might be a divergence from the conversation, but since you're working in the space of technology, I wonder what advice would you give a 13-year-old that's been advised by her IT teacher that if she takes computer science, she likes to get 100% and not to drop the subject?
Can you just...
So what advice would you give a 13-year-old that has the opportunity to take computer science because she's very good at it and not drop it in terms of the breadth and the space of technology and the advancements in the future?
Take it. Do it.
Take it, especially if you can find a computer science teacher to teach it, because
I think
there aren't enough of them.
Yeah. I think if there is interest in there and that passion for technology exists, teachers are really critical in enabling that learning and that passion in individuals when they want to pursue particular subjects. But the really great thing about the internet is that it's enabled all of this access to really fantastic information. And so pursue that passion for computer science, pursue those opportunities to learn. Cisco's Networking Academy, Code Academy, Pluralsight, all of these sites exist online that give access and free access to learning materials that help develop programming training, kind of deep computer science learning, networking skills, whatever it may be. The internet holds the answers to that learning to support whatever might be happening in the education curriculum in the classroom. But absolutely follow that passion, take that learning and really run towards it, because it's a hugely exciting industry to be a part of. And yeah, don't let careers advice slow people down in their pursuit for great learning.
No, I mean, technology is running the world today, and it's only going to increase further. So if, and for anyone who was in the previous session, which I fortunately caught some of, there is a huge skills shortage right now. And as more companies become more technology focused and driven, that only looks like getting worse at the moment. So if you're in any interest in computing science or technical careers, it's a great time for it. It really, really is. Two other things to add, I think. One, of all the things you could try and learn, even if you don't get the support where you should, coding and software engineering and everything of that nature is fantastic. Even back in the early days of the web, it's how we were all learning then. You know, we were all writing tutorials for each other, and it hasn't changed. It's one of the best things to learn online. There's so many ways of doing it. And yes, Pluralsight, for instance, is one of the systems I provide even all of my development team. They are all learning right now and continue to every month. It is part of being a professional sort of software person or technology person. The final thing is that also companies are maybe woken up, depending on who you are, or continuing to wake up, that diversity in your teams is good for a whole host of reasons. And I won't go into them all. I think probably people in the room will know it, but a whole host of reasons, which means if you've got that skill set and interest, it's just a great time to be doing technology. I would not be defeated. I would not allow anyone to be put down from following something they're interested in. But certainly the internet is a great place for learning anything to do with software and computing, so that's great as well.
And for anyone who's in the audience who perhaps doesn't have a computer science teacher at school, there's some great resource out there. So the STEMettes do a lot of work where you particularly linking up schools, young women of all ages with mentors in the industry. They run some amazing hackathons, some amazing workshops. So if you're at school and you don't have a computer science teacher, or you are a teacher and looking for more resources, definitely recommend the STEMettes. I'm a very proud volunteer with them. All their events are free, so and a whole range around the country. So definitely have a look at those if you're interested, whether you're teaching or interested to learn more.
Yeah, so if you've got any children who are really interested in computer science, then definitely encourage them, whether they're going to be a grade A or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You know, just getting that experience of hands-on computer work, whatever it might be. It could be using I don't know, Microsoft Office, it could be using Excel, it could be using PowerPoint. As long as you're kind of engaging with technology in some way, it might not even be software, it could be hardware, it could be, you know, buying an old computer and then allowing them to dismantle it just to see what's on the inside of it. You know, just by creating that relationship between the person, the individual, and what computing actually is, goes one hell of a long way. And we haven't even talked about kind of like open source and the way that even software engineering is actually way out there in the open now. And so you can visit sites online like github.com where we have, you know, individuals who are developing code in their bedrooms alongside organizations like Microsoft, Google, Cisco. Lloyds are just moving into there now, you know, and they're all putting their code out there for people to actually look at. Whether they understand it or not, it doesn't matter. You can see it, you can kind of like, you can bring it down to your computer, you can kind of play with it, and then you can start running it. And something that I'm actually really passionate about, and I know that we're in a marvelous university here, you know, that provides a really good education. But there are a lot of people out there who don't have, you know, the opportunity to get involved in education in the same way as, you know, I did. I was actually really privileged. I did a degree and I got my qualifications at the end of it. But there are there's a lot of intelligence out in the community now who might not be educated in the same way as I am, but it doesn't necessarily dictate whether they're smart, you know, or whether they're not. You know, they're smart individual people who've got talents that they can apply to the industry, but may not have the opportunity to come into the educational system for one way or another, whatever that might be. And there are charities out there who are actually finding who these people are and bringing them into their organizations or into their charities and teaching them about blockchain, teaching them about crypto, teaching them how to use JavaScript, teaching them how to use Python, you know, and like what we were saying, there is a massive skill shortage out there. So if anybody's got any ideas about how, you know, your grandmother who's like 80 years old and who, you know, is in front of the TV can actually do some coding and use, you know, GitHub, that's a little bit of an extreme example. But it doesn't need to be, you know, from our nieces and nephews. You can join at any age that you like, you know, and there's nothing to hold people back from just playing. There's Raspberry Pis, there's Arduinos, which are both open source as well, and you can pick up online. And they're all kind of like hardware examples too. So for me, it's all about being playful with it, rather than kind of like finding a course.
And I suppose to me, computer science or computing is about computers and humans. So for GCSE, you get to build a system. And the system isn't just code. Code means nothing unless you've got something interesting to make. Think about all the rubbish bits of software you've seen. You think, well, that's just maybe very good code, but there's no purpose. So if your daughter's a child of imagination, then she can build a really good system. There's no reason why you can't get the same grades GCSE computing as you can in all other subjects. But I can definitely see that people who come through, be it computer science or the range of degrees which involve computing or an interest in that, there's a world of jobs going. So if you're interested in drama, tick. If you're interested in museums, tick. Banking, insurance, aerospace, a whole medicine. It's everywhere, so it is the most exciting field to be getting into. You know, I've had students saying, well, what job will I get at the end? And I've just said, well, if we were talking about law, I couldn't guarantee lawyers will necessarily get a job, partly because of the competition in that area, and partly, well, I'm not sure it's robot-proof. But to me, the robot-proof skills are the computing skills and the creative, the design skills. So if you can combine both, brilliant, or you know, whichever routes you go down, it's not just that there are jobs, because you know, there are a lot of unexciting jobs. I think they're really exciting jobs. And as you said, that those jobs are going to shift. You're going to be learning throughout your career. And you're going to start off in one area. You're not going to be the architect for life. You're not going to be the systems engineer for life. It's such a fantastically exciting area. And Jane might know. Jane teaches. She helps teach teachers to teach computing.
Hello. Sort of on that, actually, I'm a physiotherapist and starting to go the tech direction. I'm really interested in some of the conversations you're having around ethics and accessibility to tech. So within healthcare, quite often the people that we really need to be targeting are the ones who are the hardest to reach. And I think it's about time that the NHS and healthcare were doing more in tech. But how can tech help reduce the inequalities rather than make them wider? I think with things like Uber and banking, even though they want to be accessible to everyone, it's not the end of the world if they're just getting the people with money who are well educated, but in healthcare it's the opposite that we need to target.
There you go. Okay, let's start with that.
Okay. I'm going to give this one a go. So, okay, healthcare. I haven't worked in healthcare, but even within banking, because earlier somebody actually mentioned, would technology actually close branches, right? And if you kind of like apply that, yes, technology has closed branches within banking, across retail banking, which means that, like in your example, certain people within society may be disadvantaged. In the same way as, when the post office, closed within your local newsagent, and then people needed to travel to the centre of, a town in order to be able to, collect their pension, post their letters, and even meet with community. Now, what we're actually doing, and I don't know how this will apply in your case, you may have to kind of like, piece this one together. Accessibility within technology is actually extremely important, and in fact is actually a legal regulation. So all of the technology that we actually produce needs to be accessible by everybody within society. So whether you've got a physical disability, whether you've got a cognitive disability, whether you've got an eyesight or audible disability, you need to be able to engage with that software at that point. But then you do also have people who can't engage with technology at all. And so funny enough, right, so this isn't actually something that we're doing, or it might be something that we're doing, I don't know, but we had a hackathon ourselves within Lloyds Banking Group. And one of the teams that we brought in, who are a team of engineers, actually faced into this problem. So if the bank of the future is more digital and online, how do we actually solve the social problem for our grandparents who can't, engage with a mobile phone or an iPad? And what we actually thought was there are kind of areas within society that do have access to certain people. So pharmacists, for instance, could be, and we don't have any data, this is like a hackathon, this is like people, bring some ideas together. If we could find the areas of society, so whether it's your newsagent, whether it's your pharmacist, whether it's, somebody who, delivers to your house, whoever that might be, if they could, be trained and taught in how to engage with people who can't engage with technology in finance and banking, maybe we could actually create more of a social model of engagement around that, which both answers the technology question because the technology is there and it's being applied, but also the social one because we're actually getting out into the community and teaching these skills and applying these services at the point where people need them to be applied. And so it's almost like a crossover between, we can't just remove the human factor, but we've got to find where that human factor exists and kind of get that in there as well.
It's an absolutely brilliant question, and it's kind of one, we often talk about the opportunity of technology, but how to ensure they're accessible to everybody. I think something is that, first of all, acknowledging that technology is not going to solve everything, and it requires human beings to really think about the problem and understand it. So almost understand when you've got a problem, which parts of society are going to be enabled by technology, and which parts do we need to think about a different solution for. So I don't have the answer for you right now, but I think part of it is being able to understand what the problem is, and being really open that no, technology may not be the right method for that group. How can we bring them into technology, but also service them in the same time in a way that supports their needs?
A bit of a personal example for me, my mother is a midwife, my sister is a paramedic, so I have quite a lot of healthcare related jobs in my family. And I think the biggest play that there is for technology in both their worlds and the work that they do is really around enabling people to access, so people who are already willing and able to access appointments or information or whatever, prescriptions, whatever it may be, in a digital way that saves time, money and energy, I think is one way of doing that. That then frees up time for practitioners to be able to spend time working with those harder to reach people that are may not necessarily able to engage in that way. There was some data revealed out in the press yesterday that AI and ML is being able to predict NHS appointments and people that aren't going to turn up with a 90% accuracy rate. Technology and using data in that way to be able to work with users of the NHS, users of healthcare services, to be able to tap into the ways that they're going to respond when they receive a doctor's appointment or when they need to go in for particular treatment. That's really where technology can, I think, open the doors of how people access healthcare so that the practitioners then have more time and space to focus on those harder to reach groups.
Just the example I'm thinking of, when I went to UAL, University of the Arts London, what their finest degree show in the summer, in the area of service design, one of the students was working with Bupa and had got quite an interesting system where it's partly analog and partly digital, and I think sometimes we jump too quickly into digital and we forget how a kind of crossover systems operate. And it was working around neighbourhoods, so getting people to work together by using sort of analog cards to say who they were, what their interests were, and so forth. But then also having a book where you would place a phone and it kind of took you through a narrative journey, sometimes based around health and appointments. So I think what we need to do is get technologists and designers and patients and healthcare practitioners into places where we can actually share ideas and explore the arena. Otherwise, the risk is we're going to get the tech-driven solution of, hey, it's technology and it's fantastic, and we forget the people who don't have the tech or don't want to use it, and especially when it's something intimate and personal.
Very well, especially as it's so cold.
Maybe it's warmer on stage. Maybe I don't know. Is everyone freezing? I do apologise. This used to be the warmest place till 3 people fainted at graduation, and then they brought in aircon. It was miserable when we used to sit there in our gowns on stage. We threatened to go in with bikinis just to scare off, but we finally, now everyone's freezing. But I'd like to thank everyone for being on the panel. Okay.